And now, without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, who is one of the producers of South by Southwest's Interactive Conference. In that role, he is at the forefront of emerging technologies and gets to see firsthand all the cool things that are happening in tech on a daily basis. He has spoken at Inside Austin, TEDx, WebVision, and many, many other conferences. And we are lucky to have him here talking about the importance of ... And here is Shawn O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Again, thanks to everybody. Yeah, we're going to do something a little different today. It should be fun. As Ian said, my name's Shawn. I've been in Austin for a long time. I recognize a lot of faces here in the audience. It's good to see everybody. And right before the talk, one of the guys who's working on the audio came in and was commenting on the wireless mic and was like, "Oh, it's going to be Phil Donahue." And yesterday I actually had tweeted working on my Phil Donahue impression, because today we're going to do something a little bit different. There'll be a lot more interaction in the spirit of the camp and of breaking down kind of the traditional panel format, which is something that we try to do at South by Southwest. This kind of like one to many, A to B thing. I don't know, it's kind of tiring. But yeah, so it's going to be a little bit of a wild ride, I think, and we'll hopefully have some fun and just kind of go from there. And I'll try not to let my staff heckle me too much. Thanks for sitting in the front row. So yeah, I started out as a volunteer for South by Southwest in the last century, and I've kind of been a full-time employee for about 13 years. How many of you have been to South by Southwest? Yeah, most of you. I figured that you'd be very familiar. How many have volunteered? Okay, good. How many of you are programmers? Like, consider yourself more on the back end of things? Front-end designers? People who are somewhere in between other? All right, the other category is the best. Good job. So yeah, I guess I'm in that other category now too. My role has changed a lot. We wear a lot of different hats at South by Southwest. And so I'm going to talk a lot today about my personal journey into technology, tell a few stories, have you guys tell a few stories, also talk about South by Southwest and kind of our journey, mostly through our front end and web stuff and how I got dragged into that and how South by Southwest ended up on Drupal for all of its online properties. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So hopefully it'll be some fun, so bear with me. I think most of you probably know what this is. An Apple II. This was the first computer that I owned at some point in the early to mid 80s. And I don't know, I think it was like 1 megahertz maybe for like the later years. Anyways, it's really my first kind of love affair, if you will. I spent a lot of time with my Apple II, and I'm going to tell you just a couple quick stories. One was the first time that I ever used a modem, and I think this was probably the 2400 baud version. It actually had the internal modem. It wasn't the separate phone like War Games or anything, but it was pretty close to that. For those younger members of the audience, you should Google baud and have some fun with that. But the point was it was crazy slow, and the first time I remember trying to dial into a BBS, it was some point, I guess, in late elementary school or early junior high. And I'm sitting there with a couple of my friends, and we're like, firing this thing up for the first time, and we're on this command line, and we're about to dial a number. And you know how, like, you never forget your best friend's phone number growing up? So we didn't know any BBSs to dial into because we hadn't figured it out yet. So I just let's just 521-2294 and see what happens. And sure enough, on the other line, my friend answers, and hello, and in our excitement, we're like, hello, John, can you hear me? Like totally, again, having no idea that this wasn't a two-way thing, which to us sounds like we'd go, let's put the phone in the computer and we can talk to each other. Back then it was like, I got the phone line, it's great. So it's very different, but some of my first experiences communicating were, basically being a kid trying to find BBS stuff. And the second moment that I'll never forget was really the first image that I saw of the web. And I was at my dad's office. My dad basically moved data out of mainframes for insurance companies. And I'm sitting there in his office and doing some odd jobs for him, and one of his coworkers comes in and goes like, "Come here." So we walk down the hall, and we go to a closet. There's a terminal monitor there. And he starts downloading this image. And we're standing there, and as this image is kind of slowly coming together, and you kind of begin to see what it is, you realize that it's kind of a scantily clad woman that's slowly loading. And it probably took 3 minutes. So I'm having this like really awkward like moment in my sexual development with my father, and and his coworker, for 3 or 4 minutes, and that memory stuck with me, and it's something I want to talk about today. One of my first important points is the importance of being grateful with regards to technology. I'm not talking about, let me just clarify, I'm not talking about being grateful to see naked people on the internet. I'm somewhat talking about being grateful for the speed at which you can access information. But, it's important for us to take the 30,000-foot view every now and then. I think for those of us who work with code, do this stuff, are very detail-oriented people at times, and we lose sight of some of the bigger picture items that can make us more successful in our career, make us more successful with our projects. So that's some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. Being grateful for all the technology that we have at our disposal and our ability to access information in unprecedented ways, and we just forget about this. I mean, in the short timeline that I've been playing with computers and kind of geeking out, so much has changed. So much changes all the time. I was arguing about, or actually complaining about, something about technology and how it facilitated gossip blogs and some kind of online cultural discussion with a friend of mine who's a classics professor at UT, and he's like, "Shawn, you really need to get perspective on this. In the golden age of Greek and Roman culture, odds are in your lifetime, your village would be invaded and everybody would be killed and sold into slavery. And, it's like, get some perspective on this whole thing. It's amazing right now." It's kind of like that same thing, like the Louis C.K. bit about flying and Wi-Fi. If you guys have heard of that, he's like, here's a guy that's complaining about the Wi-Fi in the airplane. He should have his arms raised in the air saying, "Wee," the whole time. This is really important for us to think about, on a daily basis and help our interactions with other people. And with that in mind, Christopher, you're going to be my first victim today. I'm going to ask you something that you're grateful for. You're totally tweeting this, aren't you?
Yeah, I totally tweeted that. Grateful for the internet, or
just what are you grateful about? Technology.
I'm grateful for the web because without it, I wouldn't have a job I love. So yeah.
Yeah, being grateful for the web is good. Not only can we make phone calls and talk to all these people, but just the fact that the web exists. And I'm going to be talking a little bit today about what kind of web. I will add that, as far as the interactive components of this, nobody wants to answer these questions. Nobody wants me rolling up on it. But I will say, for the most insightful comment today, I will give you a complimentary badge to South by Southwest. How about that? Is that cool? Does that motivate anybody? Maybe. Yeah, all right. Get ready, buddy. Get ready. So, really quickly, this was the first program that I ever wrote. This is just in BASIC. I learned the print command. I was like, whoa, hey, check it out. And because I evidently had a lot of time on my hands in elementary school, I mocked up with the print command all 88 constellations, which I thought was pretty awesome because I'd run like Scorpio, and it would just go bzzz. So you'd have to hit pause program, the short key, so you could actually see the stars that you were trying to whatever, which is pretty awesome. And that didn't work out so well. And I wish I would love to show you an example of that, amongst other things. But the second thing, which again, it seems like one of these obvious things, but I can't tell you how many times I've failed to archive my work. I'm going to show you a bunch of websites from South by Southwest that most are, I think we only archive on our active network back to 2004. There's a bunch of other stuff that I would have loved to shown, even for my personal work, I don't have access to. So it's really about this idea, that knowledge in any form, and not just with the projects that we work, just comes and goes so quickly, especially in the digital space. You work your ass off to design a product, it has a shelf life. Think about that. Think about, okay, what environment am I building this in, and how am I going to preserve that? This same guy, professor friend I was talking with, is really into this concept of perishable knowledge. And all he does is study knowledge that, isn't necessarily even that old as an archaeologist, but it's gone in the blink of an eye. And I think we need to pay a lot more attention to this, so that we, a lot of the time and energy that we're spending building value and building digital experiences sticks around for longer than a year or two. A good example, like how many of us, back up our tweets, and all these kind of things, Yeah, very few of us. So, with that in mind, I'm going to pick the next victim's name. Oh, you wanted to talk, didn't you? So do you archive any of your social media stuff that you do?
Does it count if I intend to?
Intentions, pave the way to hell, right? I think that's good.
Ah, jeez.
But yeah, again.
No. But if I did, when my first child was born, I announced it to the Drupal community through Twitter, and we got all of these tweets from people that I knew around the world, fellow contributors to my code, whatever. I'm sort of congratulating my daughter on her entrance into life, and I was also kind of tweeting out, "Hey, she's pushing now. Hey, I see ahead," kind of stuff. And I thought, man, and I was eating a sandwich. I would have loved to have archived this and sort of made a map for my daughter so she could see when the moment that you entered the world, all of these people knew about it and they all wished you well on your journey through life. So that I still can. This was only 3 or 4 years ago, almost 4, and I believe I can access that, but hopefully someday. So
Yeah, that's a great example, because I had the same problem. When my first child was born about 4 years ago, I announced via Twitter his name before I had announced it to my family, and which they'll never forgive me for that. But again, something to think about. This is my personal site, which is not that big of a deal, but for me, this is kind of how I start to archive things, and really, perhaps a lot of my creative endeavors, not just work through South by Southwest, which brings me to my next point: the importance of a personal site. And I don't mean this as everybody needs to have their ego out on the web, whatever, but I'm really talking about here not only to document your personal brand and develop a personal brand, and I think a lot of times as programmers or people who code, we forget about that, because most of it is about, you just look on IRC or whatever, and talk to me. But this is really about the independent web. I think the social media comment is great. I have so many pictures of my son, would just be on Facebook in the clouds somewhere, whatever. And I'm not on Facebook anymore, but, it's important not to just throw these, this data out there to live somewhere else. Owning your own data, owning your own thoughts and ideas is something that's really important. And I don't know, I just really think that, it's a great article by this amazing technologist, Anil Dash. He wrote this article that you should really check out called The Web We Lost, and it was really talking about all the different things. I think this was brought about because of what's happening in the RSS and the Google Reader and a lot of other services. And he really goes back to 10 years ago, and he's like, look at all these things that we had that are amazing, that were ours, and the way that the web worked, and how much it's changed now. Through large companies that granted we're getting value out of those services, but just it's kind of a cautionary tale. Don't let that be the only outlet. And it's so many of us. I spend most of my time on Twitter. We're doing other things. So let me ask a question. Do you have a personal site?
No.
What do you do for work?
I work at UT. I'm a web strategist.
Yeah, UT web strategist. So there's probably a lot to say about how the academic world, how working at UT, impacts things. So I don't know. I went to UT for a long time. I went to UT for 7.5 years because I was dropping out of school to go tour with bands and do stuff, and which was the best. This is before you could get in trouble for being at school too long. But yeah. So again, I think I encourage all of you who does have a personal site here. Okay, good. And I think it's easy for us. I know for myself, this is something I'm trying to do is blog more and retweet less. I really think long form on the web is something that's really important. We were just having a discussion actually before about how that depth of and even if you're talking about code or how to do something, it's just so important. And having that be your own online property. The next thing I'll talk about really briefly, and then I'm not going to talk about myself anymore, is this project called Rock That Font. In 2007, I was fortunate enough to introduce Gary Hustwitz's film Helvetica. And it's a documentary. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. And it's about just the typeface Helvetica, whether you love it or hate it. But it really impacted me because, it changed my perception of how information was transmitted to me. And there's that great quote that about the clothes that words wear. And I'd kind of kicked around this idea for a while, and then a couple friends of mine, this designer Eric Hertgen and a DJ friend of mine, Les Jacobs, we threw it out there. I mean, it was messy, but we would write about this kind of lost art of album covers and typefaces in that intersection. And I learned more doing this little project than most of my time at South by Southwest. And I think the reason why is we need to be pushed outside of our comfort zones, right? And when you're at a company or you're, even if you're a freelancer doing different things, you generally will stay on the couch, watching TV, coding, doing whatever you need to do. And I think, starting from the ground up, learning how to take an idea from start to finish, I think you learn more doing that, and more important, doing it because you love to do it. Maybe it's something that eventually you want to be a moneymaker for you. Great. If not, that's fine too. I mean, this particular site's been ad-free for 4 years, just because we were fortunate enough that we can do that and have fun. And so I encourage you all to have, a personal project, something that you're developing just for the love of it, because really that's what the web's about. It's not about, if I hear somebody say monetize one more time, I just want to slap them. I mean, it's just let's do stuff because we love it, and that I think is what ends up, the rest will follow. All right. So I did just show you some WordPress sites. That theme, they're all modified from Shaken and Stirred, which is a great little company that develops things. But I also want to talk about, and I think this is pretty obvious to most of us in this room, the importance of knowing more than one platform, and that whether that's programming language, whether that's hey, I know Drupal, maybe I should learn something else, because it's really about solving problems. Whether you're a developer or designer or anything, you need to have the maximum amount of tools available. And I think specialization that we have now in the industry is great. We obviously have to take a deep dive, but it's going to change on you in the blink of an eye. And I think obviously Drupal is an amazing platform. It's probably the best right now, obviously, for deploying big websites with lots of fancy things that you need to do, and an amazing array of modules and a fabulous community, and we all know that. But think about what's next, and I'll talk more about content management systems here in a little bit. But this is something that I definitely wanted to drive home. Does anybody remember Pivot, the content management system Pivot? It was a database-free content management system that I ran a number of blogs with in the early part of the century, and I did it because I was lazy. I didn't want to have to mess with a SQL database or anything, and so through permissions and all kinds of stuff, it would just rewrite files for you, whatever. Super secure, I'm sure. It was great, but it was a lot of fun, and I should probably learn to fire it up so I can rescue blogs that I'd written with it. All right, so on to South by Southwest. I started at South by Southwest as a full-time employee in 2000, and so the first full South by Southwest I saw was 2001, which was basically, the Dow Jones, the whole dot-com bubble was at the highest point it had been in ages. The following year is the lowest point it had been in March when South by Southwest happens, and we ended up losing one of our art directors, and had moved on to better projects. And so this was the site. I think we're actually missing some gradients and some CSS that didn't load on this because this is from the Wayback Machine. But with a lot of companies, we didn't have a lot of resources. Matter of fact, that picture at the top, those pictures that we just picked because Illustrator had just come out with their live trace feature to vectorize things, and that was really cool. So the green one, which was represented interactive, is actually just me with a cheap digital camera in the backyard, taking a picture of that's actually Jason McVeary of Media Temple, if you guys know, he's a community man. Nobody should be doing that. Nobody should be doing that. And I ended up being at a meeting with a lot of the tech folks, I'm like, look, I'm really trying to develop this community of interactive people. These are people that build websites. It's kind of like a big deal. This isn't really going to fly. And I'd really ruffled some feathers of some people in this room, and they were like, fine, well, then you fucking do it. And I was like, okay. And at the time, I didn't know how to deploy a full-blown website and how to do that. And I think, I took a big risk being like, okay, I'm going to go from programming this awards show that we do to like taking on all these new responsibilities at the company and become a front-end web developer in what little spare time I have. Okay. But it was something that really paid off. And I think that, in our daily lives, I think, it's that fear of failure, the fear of actually having success on a project that, it's our own personal limitation. We have all this technology in front of us, all these resources, and we're like, I don't know, I'm kind of scared to do that. So that for me was a big jumping point, which ended up with some kind of fun things down the line. So I don't know, who feels like they're a risk taker? All right, you're a risk taker. Give an example of how you're a risk taker with a project.
Well, I'm actually a patent lawyer by background. But which is itself a kind of a risk taking, but I decided to start up a couple of websites, and I have a mechanical engineering background too, so I knew programming, but the whole business of actually creating websites from scratch, not knowing anything about it, I didn't know, and I just said I'm just gonna do it, and that's how I discovered Drupal, and just very grateful for Drupal.
Yeah, most certainly. So who here is like the biggest risk they took was starting their own company or consultancy? Yeah. Yeah, various startups. I mean, and is it the kind of thing that's paid off? Do you feel? Yeah.
And you're not always making money, but I still enjoy it. So I write sex code, SECS, in the semiconductor world. And I always like saying that when you talk about high-speed sex change on an airplane, people look at you. But I started out at Semitech, did stuff for Intel and AMD, and I said, we can do this ourselves instead of going with the big guys. So I work with a guy here in town who's brilliant, MIT grad, and we do small and medium-sized fabs, and we go in and do it all ourselves, and it's just really cool to go, I did that, and it didn't break yet.
Yeah, it's good. And I that's really inspiring because I think, there's a lot of people in the audience that you're kind of, working at companies. They may not be having the best experience there. Like, man, what if I could do this on my own? And so I think it's, that's one thing that I hope you guys do at DrupalCamp is, importance of mentoring somebody and having a mentor. This is a great place to meet those people that have started their own companies and consultancies and made the leap. And this is what's great about events like this. And let's not forget that when you're at the happy hour tonight, having one too many. So this is the 2004 site. This is actually from Wayback Machine. And this is kind of a disaster in that all the things that we did at the time with these crazy CSS hacks because of things like Internet Explorer, and some of you may remember this, that like a fixed image that, you could scroll and the image would stay in one place. That's crazy. That was the first kind of, attempt for me. Not real pretty. We were using a custom CMS that we'd written ourselves that would write, just all the static files. And then 2005 was like the first year that we kind of started to maybe get in the ballpark of getting somewhere. This was kind of a big year for the Interactive Festival in general because we had Malcolm Gladwell come. He had just published Tipping Point, which was like a big book for a lot of bloggers out there at the time. And the reason why things kind of took shape like this, I was telling you about how I'm standing in the backyard taking pictures of Jason and doing like our look and feel for that year, trading somebody a badge for a logo. And we just done things the way we had always done things, which is a dangerous thing. It's just the first year that we actually got around to asking somebody for help. That site was actually an agency here in town, which is kind of mutating at the moment, but the Dakota Ring Design Concern. Christian Helms, who had worked with Michael Beirut in New York and is an amazing talent here in Austin. I think he now has Helm Workshop. He does all kinds of crazy stuff. But check him out. But he and those other folks that worked with us, and again, working with the agency really changed the game for me personally and professionally, and for a lot of us at the company, because there's a whole, creative process that you have to go through, and as you guys know, that can be, a wonderful thing, and yet pose a lot of challenges as well. And I guess before I move on to the thing, I feel like, with the exception of a few of us, most of us are risk averse. Most of us don't know how to ask for help. Most of us, I'll just Google it. And fortunately, we've got these wonderful communities online now, especially for those of us who are coding. I've got a specific problem. I mean, the whole lazy web thing, just like, hey, help me do this. I don't want to read. But who feels like they're really good at asking for help? Because I want to hear, I'll go in the back and hear this. Because I don't know, this has been something that took me a long time to learn. So you're somebody what's your secret to asking for help and not being afraid to do it?
Really, the secret is the only way you can learn is to admit that you have a certain level of ignorance. And because if you know everything, then you can't learn anything. And so once you realize, well, there are things that I don't know, and so the best way to learn those things is to ask someone else who might know. So.
That's a good point. And I think, too, this points to this kind of tendency that we have of those in tech to, hoard knowledge. Like, no, dude, I'm the only guy in the company that can do that. You can't do that. And you're going to learn, if you haven't already, that the best leaders are people that admit that they don't know. And they're the first to share that, hey, there may be a better way to do this. And really, it's kind of a counterintuitive thing in a lot of company cultures. And I think, now we have a lot of great examples of companies who have fostered amazing cultures where they do share information, and everybody's stronger as a result. So it's something to think about. This next year of South by Southwest was pretty rough. I'm glad we have this scary clown on there, because that's good. But you can see this. I want to show you this just really quickly, because it says this is an archival site. Please visit our current site at southbysouthwest.com. Of course, feel free to browse this archive if you so choose. So South by Southwest, it was a March event. It was we were looking on a yearly basis. We wanted to have a yearly archive with all the band MP3s and film trailers and podcasts and things that we did live within one subdomain. But it was always a nightmare getting people to go to the live news site and be forward-thinking. And I just want to share this really quickly, because when you design projects around particular dates, particularly events, it's just a really challenge. I always be looking forward. We quickly got away from the whole subdomain thing because it was just a total nightmare in terms of what we were doing. And I'll talk more about that a little later on. But first, I want to talk about the South by Southwest panel picker and how that came to be. I think, a lot of you are probably familiar with the fact that, Interactive Festival around this time started crowdsourcing its conference. This all came about because a lot of the younger folks at the company started wearing these T-shirts from Threadless. And this was when, nobody really knew what Threadless was. And they always had crazy T-shirts, and they were $10. And we'd had some of those folks speak at our event, and we ended up being involved in one of the Threadless competitions for our big bag in this year, 2006 event. And, the big bag is this canvas tote that everybody carries around. And this is the result, this kind of Warhol-esque, highly suggestive of something. But this has been one of our more popular designs over the years. And it was our first experience with any kind of crowdsourcing project. And, Hugh Forrest, who's the director of Interactive, he was just like, why don't we do this for the conference? Because we were looking for a way, to basically structure all these emails that came in. We were getting emails, I've got this great panel idea, So we were thinking, let's just do a web form, but we'll have people that can vote on it. And so we came up with, obviously, this idea of the South by Southwest panel picker. How many of you have submitted ideas over the years to this? I know some of you have. Cool. And, so what started out is this kind of, really way to kind of control our email inboxes, turned into something very different. Lindsay Simon, who has moved on to a couple other projects, was the webmaster at the Austin Chronicle at the time. Oddly enough, he was coming over to my house as a kid when we were programming that basic stuff together, the star constellations, and we lost touch. And then all of a sudden we had this idea, and I was like, well, somebody ask Lindsay, he knows how to code, and and he's, I think it was like, the first version was in like Cake PHP or something crazy. And the first year we did it, it was basically the pure community feedback, meaning there was no curatorial element to it. In that particular year, we had all the conference sessions, and we got a lot of feedback that the panels just were a little crazy this year. The quality seemed to go down, and so the following year we really changed our approach and came up with, okay, there needs to be some kind of curation to this. So 30% would be the panel picker voting, and then 40% would be an advisory board, and 30% would be staff, and that kind of formula has worked for us, since 2008 when we made that change. But again, the importance of community. I mean, I could do a whole talk on community in Southwest and how it's a very much community has so much ownership in it. They shape it. I mean, our job is just to build basically this playground, to build the infrastructure. Much like DrupalCamp or any other event where people come in and talk about what they want to talk about. And so, I think we all recognize that, and you guys are familiar enough with Southwest to know about community. And I've done a lot of talks that I do are based on a lot of the rules that we have at South by Southwest, which basically boil down to a lot of like new age kind of stuff. Like okay, you affirm somebody that's emailed you with a particular problem. Most of the time, they're right. It's about not being defensive, about embracing them, about making them part of the process to try to come up with a better solution. We've seen that time and time again with a lot of our projects, as well as when we finally brought the panel picker in-house. So a lot to talk about there, but I wanted to talk about one of the things that I think is the biggest asset, not just for us, but for you all, is that the panel picker became something else for us. This is a tag cloud from the 2008 submitted panel picker ideas. And it's really just the kind of top layer. Obviously, it's Wordle, nothing big there. And around this time, a lot of different topics. You wouldn't necessarily be surprised by anything. It's 2009, 10, and 11. And there's two things that you can see here. And one is that the web is going away. Shortly after that last tag cloud, Wired published an article that said the web is dead. And talking about, our whole concept of what the web was evolving and changing as, mobile devices and digital experience started showing up everywhere. We were in the era of the Internet of Things was beginning. And that's when we started realizing that, wait, there's some other things that we can see in this data too. Obviously, social changing. Everybody talks about Twitter hitting its tipping point at Southwest, and when that first happened, some of you were here out in the hallway. Nobody thought anything of it. We were just like, oh, cool, that's pretty awesome. We didn't realize the ramifications of it till a year or so later, and then you had actually a little bit of a backlash against it. Where it was like, oh, I'm tired of talking about social stuff. You guys talk about social all the time. You can actually see that. It might not be that evident, but social actually shrinks a little bit in 2011. So again, like this concept of like embracing accidents in your work, whether you're talking about antibiotics or any discovery, so much of it is accidental. And particularly when you break code, amazing things can happen. And again, I think that that's something that we forget. A lot of times we're too quick to dismiss these things that happen. And if we had done that, we wouldn't have realized that the panel picker is this amazing kind of data set that's just hanging out there on the web. We actually have people scrape it all the time. And part of my job is looking at this data, developing tools to kind of look at emerging trends and what's happening before anybody really knows. And obviously this is just a really simple kind of mining of words and things like that. But anybody can do that. And it's interesting too, because there's a difference in what everybody wants to talk about and what is really emerging underneath. And so it's probably the best part of my job, is being able to play around with that stuff. How many of you have had like terrible accidents at your company with your systems and infrastructure, and it ended up being the most positive thing that ever happened for your company? Yeah, you want to talk about it? You're like, can you publicly talk about it?
A bit. I work for a company called Stratfor, and we actually got hacked by Anonymous, and it was one of the better things that ever happened to us because we got to rebuild. It was a miserable experience, but it's really enlightening, and we got to rebuild over a short amount of time, and I got to learn a lot. So yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of funny if you're like, yeah, we got hacked by Anonymous. It was a dream come true. I mean, but yeah, I remember when that happened. We've had actually a couple of folks from your company speak at Southwest about that topic. So yeah, that's great. Time here. I guess we're doing all right. All right, moving on really quickly. Again, looking at just the front end to kind of look a little bit deeper into what was happening at Southwest and some of the things we've learned. Again, we're still working with the decoder ring, custom CSS. Nothing much to see here. This was our first attempt. You remember that yearly archive problem I was talking about? This was the first year we tried to address that with 2 big forks. All right, Southwest.com, we've got all the new kind of crazy things we're doing, the general information, and then at 2008.sxsw, you've got the event-specific stuff and the experience. It actually worked terribly because it's like not really intuitive, and the design isn't doing you any favors to kind of figure that out either. So we abandoned that pretty quickly. But again, always be forward-facing, forward-thinking. 2009, this is the first time that South by Southwest used a content management system. We came really close to using WordPress because that's what I was most familiar with at the time. And WordPress was developing a lot of really cool community software at the time. And we went with Drupal. Because we felt it was better for a large-scale site, of course. There was a lot of things that we could do at the time to manage our media. A big problem at the time was like we'd have all these banned MP3s and film trailers, and it was one of the more popular parts of the site. So, PressFlow, I think we were using this Drupal 5.7. I think Drupal 6 was out, but we didn't have enough modules available to really feel comfortable going that way. I remember it, particularly with the theme, basically having to do everything from the ground up when we moved to 6, different things like that. But this is the year, post-2008 election, Nate Silver came and talked about data and a lot of cool stuff. But other than that, we'd worked with Sibley Petit, another agency here in town, and really started to kind of diversify the groups of people we were working with, which was really good. 2010, Drupal 6. This was actually the last year I was involved with a lot of the front-end development. Still involved in some of the discussions that we have with look and feel. We started working with some other people who may or may not be in the audience today with regards to our web presence and what we were trying to do, constantly battling different things. Again, still Drupal 6 at this time, here in 2011, getting ready to make the move to Drupal 7, which we did. And then basically at that point, it was just kind of skinning things. And then last year, obviously, with Dave Grohl. And our front-end designer that, I'd been kicking and screaming to bring on a real front-end designer instead of a half-assed front-end designer like me for a long time, and finally got our wish with Zach Meyer, who many of you know, who's sitting in this audience, and I'm going to embarrass. Zach, you want to talk? You want to make any comments? Zach, you could win a badge.
Oh, do I get to go to the show if I get the badge?
No, you don't get to go to the show.
I'll forfeit.
I'm totally putting you on the spot right now. You didn't.
Yeah.
You don't have to say anything.
Well, one of the interesting things about part of the process has just been there's a lot of creativity that comes out of constraint at South by, because there's, it seems like it would be. I was sort of naive to how everything was, obviously, before I got there, and so there's this image to me of this very homogeneous group of people, and they all want the same thing, but I didn't realize how much diversity and all the personalities there are in between the shows and departments and things like that. So, the transition of going from the last site to this one, where there was a lot of good progress made, and I'm starting to finally, make alliances and make the changes that I would like to see implemented. But I always have incredibly great support from the rest of the internal tech team, who, without that, would basically like whatever I do is totally meaningless because it'll get pushed over. But no, it's been a very interesting, difficult, but fun experience.
Yeah, and I think probably next year, if we're invited to talk again, Zach will do it because he knows much more about our Drupal config stuff and can talk fancy stuff. But I think you bring up a really good point. I think a lot of people, like, oh, Southwest is the man and whatever. And, we're just a small team like everybody. And, every year we're so inspired by the people that participate in the March event. And we don't take it for granted that we get to build this event from the ground up every year for the community and then scramble in this mad dash to learn all the new cool stuff and implement it by August 1st. It's like, so our development cycle is like, we try to sleep at the end of March and then try to learn some things and deploy it, by mid-July so we can test it and look at some things. So it's a crazy development cycle because we do everything from the ground up. New look and feel every year because we want people to know that Southwest is going to be different every year. We rebuild probably way too much of what we should, but we feel it's important that the event is new and different every year. And some of you that have gone multiple years, know that and recognize that. So one of the last points I want to say, these are all the Southwest properties that are on Drupal now. We're proud to be on Drupal. We're proud to be part of the community. EDU, Southwest V2V, which is our new event in Vegas that's happening in August, and then our Eco event in October. One of the things I wanted to show you guys, it's kind of my last point here, is our kind of upcoming site. This is kind of a prototype, very much a work in progress. Nobody at the company knows that I'm doing this. And it really brings me to my final point, that it's kind of the importance of not asking for permission. Sometimes to do cool things, you don't want to get caught up in the bureaucracy of your own company, and you really need a skunkworks. The panel picker stuff that Southwest has done, pretty much a lot of the other projects that we did, the various community blogs over the years, we would not have been able to do them had we not just been kind of going rogue and doing our own thing and throwing everything up against the wall and experimenting. So you need that experimenting happening in your company. You need that skunkworks division. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be nimble enough. You're not going to be, able to change enough and keep up with the market. Think about that if you manage employees. Encourage them to do crazy things that break the rules, as long as nobody gets fired. But, take risks and do all those things. So who here, again, most of the things that have happened with Interactive have happened because we weren't we didn't have a large group of people that we had to ask permission for. But I think this also applies to your personal life, right? Again, going back to the limitations that we have now, it's next to zero. Repettis of MakerBot, their company just got bought for like $403 million. He came to Southwest this past year to reveal his digitizer. Everybody's drinking the 3D printing Kool-Aid, but I think it's something really significant that we haven't seen the ramifications of. It's like, okay, I'm used to building stuff in the digital space, and now I'm actually able to manifest things in the physical space. And if you really take a step back and look at that 30,000-foot view that I'm talking about, your village is about to be killed off and sold into slavery, and look like, wait a minute. With Drupal, with 3D printing, with whatever, I can take any idea and make it a reality. Not just in the digital space, but in the away from keyboard world. And let's not forget that. It's easy to forget that when you're just reading the fire hose of Twitter or Facebook or anything else and just forget that what it's all really about. So who here is awesome at not asking for permission? I want to hear a great story about dude, I totally fucked up, but it was the best thing ever. Because I know right now Anonymous is winning here, Stratford, Steve, that whole thing. Anybody want to share a story? No? You raised your hand. What do you got? What? Here we go.
I call it meeting projects. So basically, most of the fun stuff that I've done at my work has happened when I'm online in meetings. I work remotely, so I don't actually have to participate in the meetings, so I can just sit there and work and do things. So I've rewritten like our deploy system twice doing that, and wrote multiple contrib modules just doing that kind of space. And then, come back and after I'm done say, okay, I'm put this in place, do you think we should keep it or not, is mostly how I get that out there.
Yeah, I love how you admitted that you actually don't pay attention during meetings. That's pretty good. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think, Southwest is an organization, when I started, it was like Hugh and I and a salesperson. Now we have a team of 20. We're really struggling with meeting structures and that whole thing. And it's a real world problem. Meetings, there's all this data, and they're like the biggest waste of time, and they're not productive, and it really goes back to that kind of like nimble, light, fast, cheap, and out of control. So that's a great point. I think too, keep in mind that a lot of the people we work with and a lot of people that we have the most difficulty communicating with, if we can show them, like, look, I wrote this code, look at what it does, like that, go ahead and build it. If it doesn't apply to your current project or whatever, it's going to apply somewhere. You're going to be able to do something cool with it down the line. And it might be for somebody else that makes somebody else money.
Just a truism. It's far easier to get forgiveness than it is to get permission.
Exactly. I say that almost every day at work, which, yeah. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's a great one. Just a quick review, the importance of being grateful. Like, this stuff is pretty kick-ass. Let's not forget that. Archiving your work when you do your kick-ass stuff. Make sure that you don't forget about it later. Have a personal site. Support the independent web. Get your thoughts out there. They're valuable because odds are there's somebody that's just like you that's wondering the same problems, the same solutions. It's the best part about the web. Passion project. Take any idea that you have, no matter how crazy it is, or if it's about some dumb font or whatever, and throw it out there and have a good time. You're going to strike a vein. You're going to be part of that community. You're going to be contributing to the web in a great way. Knowing more than one platform, diversifying your knowledge. You're doing that here at DrupalCamp. You're learning about a bunch of cool modules, a bunch of great ways to structure your code, and build better products and better online experiences. Take risks, ask for help, bring the community into your process. Have an iterative process. I tell this all the time to clients and various people. The people you're trying to serve, have them be part of it. You're going to end up with a stronger product at the end. Embrace those accidents and disasters and don't ask for permission. And I think, if we look at these kind of things and you apply that to, the latest Drupal install you're doing, or some kind of fun, crazy thing you're doing, or your, kids' photos, you're going to have much more fun with technology. And I think that's the whole point. You get to do amazing things. And so, yeah, thank you all for your feedback and those who participated. And I think we're going to move to like Q&A now, where you can kind of ask some other questions. We can continue this discussion for the remaining time. And that's how, if you want to send me, mail, hate mail, whatever, you can. But yeah, we have a couple minutes left if you guys have any questions. But yeah, thanks. Oh, great. See you again. Just kidding.
You talked about the subdomain issue per year. Did you solve it to your liking?
Yeah, we just don't do it anymore. Okay. So yeah, it's like this idea. It's still a little weird when the March event ends and we change the dates on the site, and we're in this kind of weird no man's land of talking about the following year when the logo has a particular year on it. But we found that particularly with the other properties, the Eco, EDU, and V2V, we've actually changed the way we kind of design things to where it's always future forward thinking, no matter what point you are in the journey, in the cycle, which is a weird one. I mean, those of you who don't work within events, Christopher here does a number of events and online workshops and cool stuff. And yeah, so those of you who don't kind of work within that, yes, you have product launches, you're sending code out and doing all kinds of things like that. But this whole concept of like all your eggs in one basket, one deadline. There's no hey, I need to wait 24 hours to deploy this. It's like, nope, it either gets done, hell or high water, or it doesn't. So that's a great point. I don't know if we've really completely solved it, but now we're from the design on down, we're trying to facilitate things where if somebody wants to hear more about the upcoming event, it's there. Yeah. But yeah, you can tell me if you solve it too. But yeah. Any other questions? Hey, John. All right, that's it. You can ask me anything about South by Southwest, like, dude, you didn't accept my panel. I'm ready. It's good. All right, we got one in back here. I'm supposed to put you on the microphone so you can hear.
So what does Southwest want from Drupal 8?
Whoa, that's a good question. There's probably other minds in our Drupal team that would be better equipped to answer this question. But I think in general, one of the things that we're talking about, I guess more, like I fall into the community API category, right? So we build a lot of things, like whether it's our South by Social experience, whether it's the panel picker, and things that we need to have all kind of live in the same place within everything, And recently, we were able to basically finally get, single sign-on across a lot of platforms and things that we have. And so, we're still working to basically integrate a lot of those things. In our registrant base, we want you to be able to come in and, share as much information about yourself and plug into just, not only the web front end, but, our South by Social and interact with other people in really unique ways. So I think a lot of those kind of social modules, which, you guys are probably much more familiar than I am at this point, and that development for us is really important. And, one of the things that I will also bring up, I could talk a long time about content strategy, because that's something that we've really struggled with at Southwest, because we really have had 3 different conferences, right, that run at the same time. They all have their own identities. They all have their own tone, their own way they like to do things. And so within interactive film and music, how we present, those 3 kinds of information, those 3 different communities that are coming to the table and kind of being blended and merged, and that kind of crazy, complicated intersection of industry where all the magic happens. Like, how do we kind of talk about that? So right now, we retooled some things just as far as the way that the blogs were structured this year to kind of basically have a front page that would be more curated and have more of our media embedded in it. And then, let the conferences kind of basically took some of the constraints off, so that if Interactive wants to blog a lot more than film or music, like we find it, so that's okay. Like and so we've also brought in somebody to be basically more of a kind of global editor of everything. So, which will help a lot. And again, you can see it in the problems that I talk about. Like, we basically have been, like somebody said, had the expression once that came in, it was like, yeah, we're like basically like these various pirate ships that are floating around on the high seas, and we're all trying to compete for resources. And I think it's the same in any company. But yeah, so I think with Drupal 8, I don't know, Zach, is there anything you can think of that you want to add, what we need from Drupal 8?
Well, I went to the Twigify talk this morning, and actually that was a really good improvement that I desperately need, because of the amount of front-end work that I do that isn't Drupal, also at South by Southwest, that is in more of the traditional model MVC structure. Having a more parallel coding style will help me greatly focus instead of having to split my brain between the 2 ways of doing things. So one of my asks is in the mail, basically. So.
All right. There you go. Cool. Next question. All right.
Okay. South by Southwest is huge, and there are a number of industry leaders that didn't come this last year because it was too big. So how big is too big? Because Drupal has some really big conferences that could double in the next couple years. What's a good number to cut it off at?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. We have a lot of internal battles about this all the time. Matter of fact, Hugh and I fought to cap the event a number of years ago and lost that battle. And in some ways, I'm glad we did. And here's why. One of our core values, particularly for interactive, is we want anybody to be able to come to the table and participate in the interactive community. And if we cap that, if prices go through the roof, if you let the laws of supply and demand take over, if you will, you change the nature of that community. I certainly don't want to see South by Southwest become more about the suits or marketers, whatever. I always want the independent developers, the people that are in the trenches doing cool things with technology to have access to that event. That's why we haven't full just on capped it. But what we have done is try to build micro events within the whole event. And I think, those who are familiar with the event kind of understand that. It's something that we're still working on and improving that process. And one of the things that we're working on right now is, how do we change, not that we're going to change, but how do we influence the community behavior, herd mentality, for example. So thanks to a lot of the social channels, which made interactive what it is, everybody wants to go to the same 5 things. When at any given time, we have 35, 40 different options. And a lot of those, so we have a problem where you'll have a couple folks that are able to kind of dominate the signal-to-noise ratio and bring a ton of people to their panel, and then there's a line, and then a bunch of people can't get in. And then you have some of the most amazing speakers in the world talking to a panel room that's not full. I don't know how to solve that problem, but we're working on some technical solutions. One of the things that we haven't done a good enough job of, which I think hopefully we'll be able to deliver this year, is more of these indicators of what's happening in any given room. I mean, we have technology with whether it's location-based data from our RFID systems to like check-in data to anything to where we basically, through our system, say, hey, you're looking at me funny, like, don't make any promises, dude. No, but we're trying to get a lot of that in place to where like, oh, this panel is like, almost full. I should really look at other options. And I think that's kind of one of the secrets to navigating South by Southwest, and we really struggle, and we know that a lot of our tools and filters are lacking, and for the whole experience and how big it is and the scale of it. And I mean, the number of times that somebody's been like, dude, we can do your stuff better. And we're like, okay, here's an opportunity. And they're like, whoa, this data is crazy. What are you talking about? You got to serve all these different masters and this. And it becomes, where the rubber hits the road. But again, it's that iterative process. We just listen to the community. We make it better. We do what we can with the resources we have. But I think we got some tricks up our sleeve that are going to make it pretty interesting. So there's a lot of different facets to that problem. Like if, for example, everybody seems to want to come to the convention center just because it's that herd mentality, and like they won't go to like other campuses that it might just be like a short walk away. And some of the coolest stuff that we had this year was actually at this parking lot across the street. It's called South by Southwest Create, where we really just focused on people doing cool stuff with technology. So we had like Autodesk, and we had all these people just doing cool stuff, photographers talking about their work, digital asset management, all kinds of stuff. Very few people went. Because again, how do you it's basically the amount of noise that's happening during the event. It's a real challenge. It's just like the web. I think one of the best descriptions, like South by Southwest in March, is like the internet in real life. You've got all the amazing things about it, but you've got all the other things about it too that are challenging. So I hope that helps to clarify a little bit there. But next question. This is all Christopher. Okay, let me go back and talk to Tex real quick.
For Grumpy Cat is the reason they didn't go there.
Yes, Tex mentions the Grumpy Cat phenomenon. Again, I love it that Mashable brought Grumpy Cat in, and because even before they did, we were like, we got to get Grumpy Cat to South by Southwest. But if you look at, or whatever Google Trends or whatever data you look at, and the whole Grumpy Cat kind of dominating, that's a great example. Everybody knows cats are on the internet. We get it, but there's a lot of other cool stuff going on. So, for your next question.
So, South by has grown, and has grown over Austin, and so you've added bus shuttles and some of that. And so, has that gotten better over time, or you guys think you've solved that problem?
Yeah, thanks to one of my cohorts, Way, the shuttle systems have dramatically improved. As a matter of fact, last year was the first year that I rode them around to different campuses, and I was like, man, this is not going to work. I'm not going to be able to get there in time, and I'm going to be screwed. And it worked great. part of the reason is we built like a shuttle tracker system. So through our mobile app, you can look at where the shuttles are. It'll tell you where they are, where they're coming, and so it lets people plan a little bit better. I mean, it's not perfect, but I went from here to the Long Center to see like the Kim.com thing numerous times. Didn't have any issues. But yeah, again, as an event organizer, you've got like the nuts and bolts and the logistical stuff. That is like, that has to work. There has to be, everything from the AV equipment on up, and then there's the other layer of like nice, awesome things that everybody would love to have to make their experience that much better. And like, so it's kind of brick by brick. But yeah.
For us, like, we got caught up in the Austin traffic with the actual bus shuttles, and so I was like, it's kind of hard when you actually have to go from one popular event to another popular event, and then you have the Austin traffic. So that's
or even trying to eat food. One of the, as a conference organizer, okay, we used to have breaks for lunch, and we got to a certain point where we due to demand for the event, it was like, we can't have a break for lunch, because if we have one break for lunch, we destroy the city of Austin. Like literally, like the sewer lines won't work. I don't know. I mean, it's just like restaurants are packed. So we really designed the event to where, you guys are adults, you pick when you eat lunch or not eat, as the case may be. But, these things about, that how you design and organize a conference for the experience that you want people to have. But we are, to speak to that, South by Southwest stresses the infrastructure of Austin. Back to the question of, overcrowding. At one point in time, we were like, oh no, we're good, man, because there's only a finite number of hotel rooms in Austin. There's a finite, airline system that flights come in. So like, we're totally fine. Like, there's going to be a natural cap. But we completely underestimated the creativity of our community and the links that they would go to, on Craigslist to kind of like, let's all pile into a house. And and once Airbnb and HomeAway and all these other kind of platforms came out, that's when we were like really screwed, because there's no way for us to predict demand for the event. So we had to kind of come at it from another angle. And I guess this is a good time to talk about the V2V event that we're doing in Vegas and kind of clarify, like, one of the fastest growing segments of South by Southwest was the startup and entrepreneurial space. Now that everybody's done a lot of cool stuff with technology, there's a lot of people that are applying that and building new things, and it's really been an amazing thing. And this is kind of the micro event that happens at the Hilton right across the street. And as a result of that, we're like, let's do something experimental. Let's build another platform for that segment of the community to get together, make some noise and talk ahead of the March event, where there won't have the same infrastructure problems related to hotels and flights, stuff like that. So we chose Vegas, which, yes, is going to be hotter than hell in August. But at the same time, you don't really go outdoors that often. Especially in Vegas, you can go whatever, from one air-conditioned environment to the next. But so we're experimenting, with that as in the brand and taking it elsewhere. We used to produce a music festival in Portland, so you remember, North by Northwest. Had a lot of experiences there, learned some things. Another question?
So I might get beat up on the way out here, but would it ever leave Austin if it got too big?
Absolutely not. I mean, I mentioned I started out as a volunteer. The community here in Austin, the stuff that they put up with, the fact that they love the arts, they love music, they love technology enough to kind of let us do what we do and support it in the ways that they do. I mentioned the North by Northwest thing. The reason why that didn't stick around forever is because, you've got, Portland's a lot like Austin. They kind of have a like, don't mess with Texas attitude too, and one of the Alternative Weekly there had kind of pulled out of the event, and we realized that we just didn't have the relationship with the community that we did with the people here in Austin. And so I don't know, it's my opinion, and because you're not the first person that's asked me that, and no way. Like, the core event will never leave Austin. We'll do some other things perhaps. I mean, like this V2V thing is an experiment for us. And we'll see. I mean, you guys are all welcome to come and check it out. I mean, it's not just for people in startups, it's for everybody. I mean, obviously, a lot of people that do web development or design, like startups, are their primary clients in business. And so we just kind of want to make another platform for folks. So please. People may talk crazy stuff, particularly if it's like, but we're not going anywhere. All right, I'm getting flagged here for time. So one more question from somebody who hasn't talked yet. No? No? Yeah? You had one more question.
I don't know if this question will make any sense, but have you had any special challenges in doing your websites for mobile devices because you're on Drupal?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think we've had the same problems that everybody else has had. You know, for a long time, we built special mobile sites. You know, it was back when we did versioning, and you know, we never did full-blown detection, but we would like basically have a separate mobile site and do all this stuff. But now, I mean, it's I mean, what's happening in responsive web design right now, and I mean, as you guys are, is just pretty amazing. And I mean, it makes it so much easier. I mean, I was joking earlier about titling this talk like "Get Off My Lawn" and you know having that whole thing, but you know the fact that the browser situation now and CSS technology is just it's so much easier than it was, and so responsive stuff, and so yeah, you should one of the things I hate content apps, right? That like just like, hey, we've got a website, but download our app to read our same content. A lot of like news media does this, whatever, and Southwest has an app. But it's more designed for just getting you down to kind of a granular schedule level and look at some other content. It's really for kind of the on-the-go kind of thing, because we know you don't want to navigate our site, which is kind of a different digital experience, a different side of the digital experience. But yeah, I definitely think like, going to like a native web, if you can do that every time and configure your Drupal, install to be mobile friendly, like don't go down these other pathways. I think it's just a waste of your time and energy and resources, and it's not really true to what the web should be about. So, all right, well, thank you so much again. Thanks to everybody for having me, and I appreciate your participation.